A question I get asked a lot of the time is, what is human or user-centered design? Well, in today's episode of Design Ahead, I'm going to tell you exactly what it means and why it is crucial to the success of projects. Welcome back to Design Ahead with me, Jake Fernandes, and today I'm going to be answering one of the most asked questions to me in my professional career, and that is, what is human or user-centered design? Now, it does have a lot of different names, like human or user-centered design. You might hear the term user experience as well, and I'm sure there's a lot of others. Product design seems to be quite popular in North America, and they are correct in describing generally the same thing, but there are a lot of niche differences when you get into the industry. Simply put, it's all about understanding the needs, goals, and challenges of a person using a product. It can be boiled down as simply as that, really, and of course when we get into the different roles and activities, we do start to expand on this. But what we do is we speak to people, we figure out, what do you need, what do you enjoy, what do you maybe not enjoy as much, what do you struggle with, and we start to design a solution based on that. Of course, we then integrate with developer considerations, stakeholder expectations, etc. But we champion the people at the center of the work that we do. So the spaces that we generally work in are product development teams. We might be designing SaaS, so software as a service. Anything that has a human element, so it could be somebody buying something, could be something that customers are using to interact with a company. So if you're submitting your tax returns, you might want a really good solid service to enable that it's easy to do so. You might be an internal user that's just completing your day-to-day job and you use a system for that. So we would come into the project ideally as soon as possible, but we can generally come in just before the development cycle if needed. It does put some blockers on, but we can cover that as well today. And we'll start to work with stakeholders, project managers, just to understand the lay of the land, and then we'll go out to the users to get their perspective as well. We might be involved in the RFP as well, which is request for proposal, or the bidding stage of a project, and we'll be able to input some general expectations on what the team might be doing from a human-centered design perspective. So where we fit into a development cycle is generally at the start. So we might have those initial expectations and objectives set by stakeholders and the product owner, product manager. We'll then come in to evaluate those from a user perspective. We'll understand the user's wants, needs, desires, create some artifacts like journeys, personas, where we can show those conversations in a visual way. We can then base that to create designs from, so prototyping, any branding we might need to do, and then we will hand off it to developers to actually build the product. We could have some human-centered developers in there, typically front-end as well. They are definitely worth mentioning, but I think just for the purpose of today and for my expertise, I'm going to kind of cut the project off at that point and leave it for developers to work with the designs that they've been given. So why is it so important? Well, the obvious thing here is that we are designing products, or we are designing services that are going to be used by real people. So why not ask them what they want? Of course, you need to take that into perspective. There's a really good saying that goes something like, if Ford asked what the people would have wanted back then, they would have said for faster horses, and he designed the car, which was, of course, much better than a faster horse. But if you do get an insight into people's expectations, what they're struggling with the current system or with their current job, current tasks, it gives you a perspective to see, okay, these are the areas that we need to improve upon, and these are the areas in which we can definitely provide a better service. There are a few other things we need to consider, like accessibility, and I might dabble into that a little bit later on, but it's a whole subject within itself. But essentially what we need to be doing is talking to the users and understanding what they need, and then producing the output that is going to solve those needs. So one of the hardest things for human-centered design to do is sell itself in a way. It's very easy to say that yes, your users will be happy at the other end, but if you're providing a service that is customer facing, a business might not be too bothered if it's going to produce the same results at the end of the day. If they're going to get £10 million of sales from month 1 to month 2, regardless of if human-centered design has been involved or not, then they're not really going to be too bothered. And of course, that is not the case. Human-centered design is essential for running a successful business. And sometimes we can work with the business to figure out, okay, here are areas in which you are losing money or you're losing out on sales. I think it's always great to show, areas in which human-centered design can improve because of current losses. And you can start to see that human-centered design increases return on investment, it improves customer loyalty, they're more likely to come back to you if you have a good user experience and they've enjoyed it. It also does reduce development costs, so if we have a really great UI designer who's designed a fantastic prototype, it's considered HTML, CSS, they've got some technical know-how as well to design a product that is quite straightforward to build, it saves the development team a lot of time in figuring out, okay, maybe this goes here and this might be the right screen to build, putting it through testing and realizing that it's completely wrong. Human-centered design allows you to create prototypes and interfaces that are going to be easy for developers to pick up. And also, you don't want to get halfway down a project and realize that you're building something that's completely wrong. So get a human-centered design team in place from the get-go and make sure that you're building the correct thing from the start. What are the roles in human-centered design? And I think this is where a lot of people can struggle to see this, especially if you don't work within product development life cycles. It's very easy to draw comparisons to a construction site, I think. So you generally will have somebody come in to survey the land after it's been purchased and the go-ahead for the construction's been given. You'd come in, survey the land, see what you're working with. You'd then get an architect to come in. You'd probably create some blueprints and think, okay, this house is probably going to go here. These are the general layouts that we're going to use. And then you'd get the builders in to create those. So the builders are essentially following a really good schematic to say, this is the house, this is the layout that we're going to go for. We've got the materials, we know how to build it. And then you get the final product. And that translates really well to human-centered design. Now, there are so many different roles and responsibilities, and there is so much overlap as well that a lot of people can do a lot of different tasks. So a user researcher, for example, might also be skilled in UX design. You might also see that UX and UI are tied together, which means user experience, user interface. You might see content design also folded into these, service designers. There's so many different roles and responsibilities, and I think everybody has their specialism, but there is a generic expectation that there will be overlap, and at the very core of every role is a human-centered design methodology. So starting off, you will typically have a user researcher come in first. These are your surveys and assessors. These are the people that want to understand the land that you're working with. They'd be the people to go out and survey or interview, question the users to really figure out, okay, what are your motivations? What are your goals? What are your pain points with the current system? And they'll be able to create artifacts like user journeys, user personas that can be picked upon by the rest of the team. And they allow you to see the state of play, really. They provide a foundation for you to build across. So going back to our construction example, and do forgive me if I get any of this wrong because I don't really have a background in construction, as you can probably tell, but our researchers would come in to be the ones to survey the land. They would understand, okay, what have we got to work with? They'd probably even go out to maybe a user base to see, okay, what type of house would people like? What's our customer base looking like? You know, is it high end, low end, somewhere in the middle? And they'd be able to take those research insights and they'd be able to pass that on to the rest of the team. And next up, we've got UX UI design. I think it's a bit tricky sometimes to separate these two. I mean, inherently my skill is within UX and UI. I can do both. And if you're really going back to what is a UX and what is a UI designer, I see a lot of the overlap is the work in which I would perform, and I can also do both ends of the spectrum that maybe don't have as much overlap if you're defining them to a point. So trying to split them up, UX is what would come first. It would be the taking of research findings, evaluating the product goal and the product vision. They would then start to create some initial wireframes, sketches, and maybe sort of define what it's going to look like. And then that would get passed on to the UI designer who'd create high fidelity products and prototypes in Figma or maybe Photoshop. And they'd essentially be taking the foundations of what UX have built and applying a lick of paint, so to speak, or using design systems to really bring that to life. And then they would pass that on to front-end development. Now, as you can probably tell from that, there's a lot of overlap because a lot of UI designers generally know what the end product should look like. So they can go back to basics and they can see, right, what should those initial wireframes look like? They can read into research insights and understand what the product vision is going to be. And same with UX designers. I think if you limit yourself to be someone that can just create basic wireframes, why not go that step further and understand how a design system works or branding works, and then apply that knowledge into your craft and be able to perform those tasks? And I think that's why a lot of the time it does get looped together. In our construction example, we've had our user researcher who's came in to survey the land and understand the user needs. We've then got our UX UI designers who come in to create the blueprints that are going to be followed by the construction workers and builders. So they'd come in, they'd see, right, this is the land that we've got. The researchers have identified that we've got maybe plots of land that can be used for this type of material or this type of house, or maybe it's just a small semi-detached row of houses, or maybe it's terraces, whatever that might be. And then we can start to create some blueprints, or we can start to think about, okay, what's the house layout going to look like? So those UX UI designers are going to be creating those blueprints. They're going to be thinking, right, how much space have we got? So can we put maybe 4 houses on this row? We maybe put 5 or 6 on the back row. And they'll start to build that up so that the developers, or in this case, the construction workers and builders, would be able to come in and just say, right, we're going to build a house here. We've got the schematics. This is what it's going to look like. I've got the materials, and let's put that all on. And we do base our solutions around those user research insights, but the other core part is understanding project timelines, budget constraints, stakeholder expectations. So if the users or the people that are in the audience for buying a house might say, I would love a solid gold house and I'd love it to be absolutely enormous and it would fill the entire plot. Of course, that's not going to be feasible to meet the project goals. So what we would then need to do is think, okay, the users have asked for these things. Is it feasible to build this in a certain time frame if we were maybe given 1.5 years to develop these properties? Can we build it with the financials that have been provided? Of course, we might be looking to sell these houses for maybe £250,000. And if we're building them out of solid gold, we're going to lose a lot of money in doing that. So we need to consider a lot of different things, of course, basing it around those user research insights to make sure that the product is meeting those, but we are limited to what we have been given from the project. So that's a very basic understanding of some of the key roles within human-centered design. Now, of course, if we're building a skyscraper or a shopping centre, there might be a lot of other roles needed, and there might be other people that need to come in to do their specialist subject. Of course, we'd be working together as a human-centered design team, but we might rely on their expertise for the things that, you know, as a UX UI designer, I might not be more skilled in than them. So we've got roles like content design, who are very, very important in making sure that we get the right message across to the user. They understand what they're doing, and the content designer typically will pick up on anything that is written. Of course, they do have other skills, so you know, if we're creating buttons to make sure that they are placed correctly, might collaborate with the UX designer on that one. But generally speaking, any sort of written content will be looked after by the content designer. And if we're building a shopping centre, of course, we're going to need to navigate people around the shopping centre. We need to make sure that things are signposted correctly. We might have a map of the shopping centre to show, you know, you're here, and if you want to get to Phoenix across there, then you would kind of come out of here, and this is the signage you would take, and you can sort of follow yourself along so you don't get lost. And then we also have service designers, and there's a bit of a hot topic about whether service design is within human-centered design, because they do look a lot at the business side of things. Of course, we all do, but I think their prowess really lies in prioritizing business needs and the cohesive piece instead of really honing in on the user perspective. Now, that is a bit of a sweeping assumption, so don't get mad at me for that one, but the service designers that I have worked with have been really skilled at being able to tie in business change or any processes that rely on changing the way in which the fundamental company works. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a massive impact on how the product's built, but we do need to make sure that the product ties in correctly to the systems that are already in place for the client. And going back to our shopping centre example, those service designers would look at how would the deliveries be managed, and what do people see when they first walk into the shopping centre? How do they even get to the shopping centre? You know, is there a car park next to it? Is there a clear road and route of traffic that allows you to get to this place? So they're looking at the peripherals, and they're making sure that the product itself is tying into everything that surrounds it. And looking a little bit around accessibility and how it ties into this example of the shopping centre, we might look at lifts, disabled access. We also might look at the colour schemes that are being used to make sure that signs are readable for people with colour blindness. But generally speaking about accessibility, I do think at this point it's better to keep it for a podcast in itself. And another big question I get asked a lot is, how do I become a human-centered designer? How do I become a user researcher or a UX designer? And if you go back to my first podcast, you'll see how I almost fell into this profession. It wasn't something I was actively looking for. I knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't really understand what was out there, and I didn't know that UX design was a thing. But it has become a lot more popular in recent times, and people are starting to look at courses or different entry points into the industry. So I can give you a little bit of an insight and things that I think would be appropriate for a junior to achieve right now. Now, the first thing, at least for me and the people that I've worked with, is that keen attitudes get you so far. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to be the best UX designer, have the best eye for brand from a junior perspective. If you're entering the industry, you need to have some basic understanding of, what the job is about, a user-centered focus, and some generic portfolio points that might translate well into the job that you're applying for. But just come with a keen attitude, come with the willingness to learn. If in an interview somebody's asked you something that you don't know, just say, I don't know about that, but I would love to know more about it. And maybe if there's something you can relate to it in jobs that you do currently, or if you're looking to go into a course that is around UX design, then you can, of course, take some experiences that you've had and relate to it. I think a really good one is if you're using a website and you run into some functionality that just doesn't quite work, or it interrupts your workflow and you get frustrated. In your mind, yes, you're getting frustrated, you're really annoyed at the process, but take a little step back just to think, why am I getting frustrated? What's happening here that's preventing me from completing that action? And that's essentially what UX design is all about. It's understanding those poor interactions and making them a lot easier for users, or it's about fixing the problems. Or if you're designing something brand new, it's about not creating those problems in the first place, of course. I think at the center though, it's all about being empathetic. It's about designing products with people at the center. You really need to care about the people that you're designing for. At the moment, I'm a lead designer in a project that has been going on for the past 2 and a bit years, and I work so closely on a daily basis with users, core subject matter experts, and I'm constantly getting embroiled in what they do. And for me, I love to become a subject matter expert in the product that I'm working on. I really like to get down into the nitty-gritty of what do they do for a job? Why do they do these things? Because sometimes you might ask them, why do you do this task? And they don't know, because they've just been doing it for the past 20 years. They just know that they need to perform this certain action and they get the job done by doing it. And that's where sometimes your value as a UX designer can really skyrocket. If you just get past this idea of creating something that looks nice, it's usable, and actually challenge some of the core principles that people don't understand why they're doing it a certain way, you might be able to create so many more efficiencies that also save a lot of development time, create a better product at the end of it, and everybody is so much happier. So if that sounds appealing to you, I would fully recommend looking at college courses, university courses. If you're somebody who is looking to go into education in that way, you might just want to find some courses online. I think Google has some fantastic UX design courses. There's a lot on Udemy as well. Even YouTube. YouTube's such a fantastic resource that I think doesn't get the respect it deserves sometimes. There is a lot of courses on YouTube that you can do for free, basically. It's just a series of videos, and I think some of those have been much more beneficial than things that I've paid for or my company's provided me. And one of the things I want to get into next year is creating playbooks, courses, materials that people can use to understand how they can get into the industry to become a UX, UI, UR, how they can excel at doing so, and show you how I became a lead designer from a junior in the space of just 4.5 years. So if that's something that does excite you, then please drop a subscribe and follow me at Let's Design Ahead on social media. Of course, it'll be something I'll be doing a little bit into the first part of next year, hopefully releasing a couple of months later. But for now, there are so many great courses. I would definitely look at the Google UX certification, something that I think a lot of people have taken up on and a lot of people being able to get jobs from. There are so many other things that you can start to understand. Color theory, you can understand human-centered design principles. What does it mean to be a user researcher? How to create a great questionnaire, how to interview somebody, just understanding some of these key concepts, just becoming a bit more invested and interested. And from there, I'm sure that you'll take off and really become great at what you do. But that's going to be it for today's episode, so thank you so much for watching. I really hope that the examples that I've given give a lot of context into what we do, and if you're somebody that didn't know what human-centered design was at the start of the video, you at least have a better insight into why it's important, the different roles that go into it, and the way in which it helps create a final product that is fantastic. It's really easy to use and is essential really in creating anything successful. But as I said, please do drop a subscribe, drop a follow, rating, wherever you get this podcast, and follow me at Let's Design Ahead on Instagram and TikTok for any short form content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.